Good evening. Welcome to 30 Letters in 30 Days. This is letter number 12. And tonight is a poignant letter. A letter about loss, the loss of a loved one. But it's also about how that connection can be maintained. And obviously that is something that is important to many of us. So, as a rabbi, one of the questions that I hear most often is this question: how to remain connected to loved ones who have moved on to another world. And there are many answers from the Rebbe about this subject. Many places where the Rebbe speaks about the eternality of the soul. But this is the letter that we're reading tonight, and each letter is another glimpse into a real person and a real relationship with the Rebbe. And it happens to be that in preparation for tonight's class, I made a call to a dear friend of mine and a supporter of Soul Words, Rabbi Shmuel Binyamin Fogelman from Los Angeles. And I said, do you know anything about this letter? And he said, yeah, I do. And he told me quite a bit. He actually says he may have the original letter in his possession, or he may have access to it. He's traveling right now, so he couldn't provide me the image. But in the coming days, that may be forthcoming with Hashem's help. I'm not going to share everything that he told me, because it's not all for public consumption, even though I'm not going to share the name. And he knows the name. He knows the name of the recipient of this letter. I'm going to share some of it, though, in the hope that it will benefit all of us. So here's what I'll tell you, the little bit that I'll tell you. The little bit that I'll tell you is that as a kid growing up in Worcester, Massachusetts, let's just say that the recipients of this letter were not the kinds of people that one normally or automatically, I'm saying from a kid's perspective at least, were not the people that one would assume were worthy of such a long and thoughtful and compassionate response from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I'll say it not as bluntly as I could, but bluntly enough to help us really understand the picture. Sometimes kids think certain people are a little bit strange, and they maybe even laugh at those people. So what I want you to know, and this is what my friend Rebbe Shmuel Binyamin told me, and I think he didn't tell me explicitly that I can share this, but he told me this was a life lesson. He said, never make any assumptions about anybody, because it may just be that the interesting people in shul are the ones who received a letter like this from the Rebbe. So set aside all your judgment, whatever you think you know, and just remember, we know nothing. Life lesson number 1. Okay, fine. He also informed me about the specific circumstances through which the particular loved one referenced in the letter was lost, how he passed away. And I think I'm going to not share that just yet, but I'll see if it feels appropriate at some point to tell you that information, or at least some of that information. Without further ado, Baruch Hashem Gimel Adar Sheni Tafshin Yud Tes, Brooklyn Bracha V'Shalom. By the grace of God, the third day of the second Adar 5719, Brooklyn, blessing and greeting. And of course, we know Bracha V'Shalom, blessing and greeting, is how the Rebbe would address a woman. This letter was written specifically to the wife of a couple, but it concerns both the husband and the wife. Durch Harava Chosid Ish Yirei Alekim Nichbed V'Naila Esek B'Tzarchi Tzibur Rav Paulin V'Chulu Mereno Rav Yehuda Tzvi Sheyichya Fogelman. Through, and the Rebbe gives many honorary titles or honorifics to describe someone that, I always heard referred to as Rabbi Herschel Fogelman. In Lubavitch, I guess we could do a lot better with paying honor and tribute to illustrious and prestigious rabbis. But yeah, Rabbi Herschel Fogelman from Worcester. And of course, we always knew a senior shliach, one of the early shluchim. He went out already in the 1940s. In fact, he was one of the few Lubavitchers who was there when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America in Tafshin in 1940. Rabbi Fogelman was from a Galicianer family and was educated in Torah V'das, and fell in with the early Chabad community in New York. This is, again, before the Frierdiker Rebbe came. So he became involved in Chabad and I guess fell for the whole package and became a full-fledged Lubavitcher, and then one of the early shluchim in America, in various cities, before finally settling in Worcester, where he spent most of his years on shlichus, several decades, in fact. And he passed away, I think it's not yet 10 years ago, in his 90s, as one of the most respected senior shluchim, earliest shluchim, pioneers of shlichus. So that's who this rabbi is that the Rebbe is referring. And the Rebbe is saying to this woman, I received from Rabbi Fogelman your regards. Is mir angekommen a bakosha, or bakoshes bracha, pan, vareich. I received from him or through him a request for blessing. And the Rebbe uses the term pan, which is an acronym Pidyon Nefesh, and it's a specific formula for requesting a bracha from a Rebbe. So I received that request for bracha for you, un eierman shichya, and your husband, may he be well. She apparently was the one who wrote it, or had it written by, I'm not sure exactly how it was done. She wrote it and gave it to Rabbi Fogelman, or she had him write it for her. I don't know, but it was for her, on behalf of her, and like the Rebbe says, un eierman, and you and your husband. Okay. Ubeis rotzen vet men eich masker sein auf dem Zion Kodesh von mein Schwer, Kveid Kedushes Admor, Zecher Tzadik Kodesh Lavroche Lachayim Haba, Nishmas begin sie mir reden, sich aus Jogen alleino, zu dem, was ihr nötigt sich. at a propitious time, I'm going to mention you at the, I'm going to mention your request and everything you need at the resting place of my father-in-law, the Rebbe. And again, as I was mentioning to you, what my friend Rabbi Fogelman Jr., the son of the Rabbi Fogelman in this letter, was telling me, this is an incredible response to people that you would not necessarily expect receive such attention from the Rebbe. And I'll put it like this. Many, many people received responses from the Rebbe that was a one-liner, Azkir al-Atzion, I'll mention you at the resting place of my father-in-law. The Rebbe could have told these people the same thing, Azkir al-Atzion, I'll mention you at the resting place of my father-in-law. The Rebbe mentions that as well, I will mention you at the resting place of my father-in-law, but then there are several other paragraphs. And just, again, another reminder to us to remember that we have no way of judging and understanding who we're dealing with. Ultimately, this is neshama stuff, and who among us knows how to evaluate and assess a neshama? Just a reminder to keep us humble. Okay. Euch schreibt mir, Rav Fogelman Shir hier, wegen dem, was es hat passiert, le'aleinu ve'le'aleinu. The Rebbe says le'aleinu twice. Shouldn't happen to us. Mit eier Sohn, ... meaning it's redacted, the name of the son is redacted, Olav Shalom, may he rest in peace. Did I translate that? I don't think I translated that. Rabbi Fogelman also wrote to me, meaning in addition to giving me the request for brachas, about what happened with your son, may it happen to no one, and may he rest in peace. This was their only child. They lost their only child. He was about 20 years old. To the best recollection that I was privy to, it happened in 1958. The son passed away in 1958. So this letter is in 1959, meaning it was probably a half a year later, maybe even close to a year later. That's why it's not, you can tell the way that Rebbe's responding, it's not an acute condolence letter. It's not like he just passed away. The Rebbe first addresses the request for blessings, the pan. But then in the next paragraph, the Rebbe mentions that Rabbi Fogelman also told me about how you lost your son. So it didn't just happen, but it was fresh. It was within the year. That's my understanding. Okay. So a young son, a 20-year-old son, an only child. I don't know the story about these people. I know that in the 1950s, Worcester was full of, it was a booming industrial town at the time. That's why the Rebbe wanted to establish a yeshiva there. And it was full of old school Yidden. You see here that I was writing to this woman in Yiddish. I don't know if these people were survivors who came out after the war. I don't know if they came before the war. But you can imagine a Jewish couple in that era, probably people who had come from the old country, probably from Eastern Europe, and now they come to America and they have a son, an only son, and they lost their son. And there are more details as well about how they lost him, but again, I'm going to maybe be judicious about how I share that. So let's just continue here. I think that's all we need to understand at this point. Und der Schuss, was ihr und euer Mann Schiechia haben getan und wollen tun in Inyonim von Yiddishkeit. Now, the merit of what you and your husband have done and will do for matters of Yiddishkeit. And I just want to reiterate, these were not the honorees of the annual dinner. Okay, these were not big donors or pillars or leaders of the community. These were very, at least from what we perceive outwardly, not just simple, humble people, but maybe even people you would consider on the fringe of the community, okay? But the Rebbe says, that which you and your husband have done for Yiddishkeit and will do for Yiddishkeit, unverständlich also understood euch, allein aufführen sich, like die Anweisungen von Teresena Kadesha, also that you will personally conduct yourselves according to our holy Torah. Okay, so you've supported Yiddishkeit, you will support Yiddishkeit, and in your personal lives you will conduct yourself according to Torah. So all of those good things, that das sicher beistehen le'ili nishmase, began Eden te menuchase. This certainly will stand you in good stead, or stand your son in good stead, as an elevation of his soul in Gan Eden, in paradise. May he rest there. I think maybe I will mention at this juncture that the anyone who's sensitive enough probably suspected it already. But this 20-year-old only child was lost to suicide. I'm not here to try to explain such an emotionally charged subject. Not here to try to explain it according to halacha or custom or psychology or anything. I just want to make an observation, which I think may be helpful for some people. And that is, and we're going to continue this letter, and there are more insights, I think, to glean. But just thus far, I think it's important for us to know that it's very clear that the Rebbe is speaking about the soul of this young man resting in peace in Gan Eden. I'm not here to have theological discussions. I'm not going to talk about this whole subject. I'm just pointing something out. This is how the young man passed away. The Rebbe very clearly is speaking about how this young man is resting in peace in Gan Eden, in heaven, in paradise, and ways that his parents can add through doing things that bring merit to this young man's soul, that can add to his station and standing in paradise. Just pointing that out. I think it's important. Und selbstverständlich, it is also self-understood, as jeder Zugab in starken sich be'emunah b'Hashem Yisborach. It's self-understood that every addition that you can make in strengthening yourself in your emunah. See, the Rebbe so far had spoken about how they supported Yiddishkeit and how they will conduct their personal lives according to Yiddishkeit, meaning living a life according to halacha. But now the Rebbe speaks about emunah, specifically about faith. So strengthening your faith in Hashem, as das was tut, that what he does, what Hashem does, darf man nit noch trachten. We don't have to think it over. We don't have to ponder it. That das zugeben in dem Ilui haneshama. That will add to the ascent of the soul. I didn't have to share with you how this young man passed away. I could have just said, and it would have been enough, I think, that it's apparent from the letter itself, we're talking about a couple who lost a child. Okay? And that itself, we could understand how valuable this advice is that Rebbe is giving and saying, strengthen your faith in God, that everything he does for his reasons, and that you don't have to keep mulling it over. You don't have to think it and rethink it and rehash it. Okay. And that refusing to go back and rehash that story, not only is it certainly better for your emotional well-being, which the Rebbe doesn't even mention that it'll be better for your emotional well-being, but I think that goes without saying. The Rebbe says that itself adds to the ascent of the soul in heaven. So even if you didn't know this was a suicide, even if you just knew that this was a couple who, Le'aleinu, lost a child, that's a valuable insight. That they shouldn't keep revisiting, why did it happen? How did it happen? Could something have been different? Stop. Stop doing that. Your faith that Hashem is in control, even through this darkest moment, that faith will be a merit for your loved one's soul and give him a greater ascent in the spiritual worlds. Now that you know that it's also a suicide situation, it's obviously that much more profound that the Rebbe is saying, don't go back and keep trying to figure it out. Try to have faith. Try to have faith. Don't keep revisiting it mentally. And the Rebbe will repeat this point in this letter. Unsicher is ibrik zu erklären euch. It is certainly unnecessary, it is certainly superfluous to explain to you, as die Neshama geht nicht chas v'sholem verloren. The soul does not, God forbid, become lost. The soul is not lost. And I read this letter before I knew what the circumstances were about how this young man passed away. And it was an important message to anyone who's lost a loved one. You should know the soul is not lost. The soul remains. The soul is eternal, as the Rebbe is about to explain. How much more so is this acutely powerful and poignant when we understand the circumstances here that this couple is dealing with. So the soul is not lost. Vodomayid is a ebekite. You know, I'm not an expert in the Yiddish language, but I can tell you that is a powerful word to me. A Yid is a ebekite. It could have said a Yid is of ebek. A Jew exists forever. Doesn't say Abik, it says Abikite. That makes it a noun. It makes it the name of a thing. A Yid is an Abikite. That means a Jew is eternality. Not just he exists eternally, but he is eternality. It's a powerful word. And I see in the translation, they probably translated it in a more normal English, so they said a Jew is eternal. But eternal is an adjective. Abikite is a noun. He's not just eternal, he is eternality. What is the concept of eternality? It is a Jew. I just want to mention, unconnected or seemingly unconnected with this theme, but the Rebbe once spoke about how Netzach Yisrael Yishaker, that the eternality of the Jewish people, which is Netzach Yisrael is also a byword for Hashem himself, is the fact that the Jewish people, in spite of all the persecution and all of the brutality that the Jewish people have been targeted for throughout the ages, miraculously defying all probability, the Jewish people continue to exist. And the only explanation for the continued existence of the Jewish people is that that is an embodiment of the eternality of Hashem himself, so that when you see a Jew, I believe this was Shabbos Vayikra Tafshin Nun, that Rebbe was speaking very strong words about nothing negative will befall the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are not worthy of punishment. And even though some people were saying about secular Jews bringing upon punishment, the Rebbe was very vehemently against that whole idea. And the Rebbe said just the existence of a Jew on this physical earth, walking the physical earth, is a testimony to the eternality of Hashem, of the Netzach Yisrael. So, a Yid is a Ebekite. A Yid is eternality. Der Unterschied is nur in Kerper. So the difference, meaning after he passes away, only pertains to the body. In andere Werte, in other words, as mit fleischike Augen kann man nicht sehen die Neshama. With our physical eyes, you can't see a soul. Obviously, you can't see souls. Weil man sieht nicht kein Guf. And you don't see the body because the person passed away. Aber der Verbund und Zugebundkeit von Eltern zu Kinder, however, the connection and the bond between parents and their children is doch nicht über das Fleischikes, nur durch dem, was mir is verbunden mit der Neshama. It is not, the connection of parent and child is not based on physicality, but rather based upon the soul. The fact that parent and child are connected, it's not a physical condition. It's not just because the biological connection, the DNA, the genetics. It's a spiritual connection. Und sie, and she, the Neshama, is doch ständig ganz, is always intact. Und man kann ständig tun für der Teuva wie Ilui von der Neshama. And you can always do things for the benefit and the ascent of the soul. Wie Frege sagt, like said earlier, like the Rebbe mentioned earlier. Durch a Torah uführung, through conducting yourself according to Torah. Conduct your life, you the living, conduct your life according to Torah. This will be good for the soul of your child, with whom you are eternally connected, irregardless of that child's physical passing, which only affects the body. But the connection of parent and child is not a body connection, it's a soul connection, and that remains fully intact and fully in force. So you can benefit your child's soul through your personal conduct, living according to Torah. Und starken sich in Betochen b'Hashem Yisbarach. And also, how can you benefit the soul of your loved one? Through strengthening your faith in Hashem. Like the Rebbe mentioned earlier, not to revisit, not to rehash the tragedy in your mind. Und mit a feste Ruhigkeit und starke Stimmung. So if you're going to have a firm calmness, a festic Ruhigkeit, like a real steady, solid calmness, tranquility, and a starke Stimmung, a strong attitude or conviction, as Hashem Yisborach is der Etzem HaTov, that Hashem is the ultimate essence of goodness. That is going to benefit your child's soul. If you can find, within this tragedy, if you can find tranquility and believe that Hashem, in spite of things that we see that do not appear so, and we can't, with our finite minds, make sense of them, but nevertheless, Hashem is the ultimate essence of goodness. That state of mind will benefit your child. It's a very powerful idea. It's almost like I'm just, again, reading things into to these letters. But if you would tell a parent, listen, enough already, you're going to make yourself sick. You got to stop revisiting and rehashing the tragedy. What benefit will it do your child if you drive yourself crazy and you ruin your health? You got to calm down. You know what? I don't know how compelling that would be. I think that might even be the opposite of compelling. But that's not what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said to these parents, I need you to calm down and find inner peace through your faith in God. And that will benefit your child. That will give your child a greater ascent in paradise. So find that tranquility and that peace through faith, not for you, but for your child. And I think that's the language that parents understand, and that Rebbe knows how to speak that language. Just me reading into this. Okay. Es wollt gewen a gleiche Sach. Man soll beidig sein, abchecken, die Tfillen von eurem Mann, Shirje, und euch die Mezuzahs in eure Dira. It would be a good thing to check your husband's Tfillen and also your Mezuzahs in your house. Also, sie sollen sein kosher, wie der Din is. You should make sure that they're halachically proper. Und euch als Zugab zu dem, was gewiss hit ihr ab, dem guten Minug von jüdische Töchter zu geben auf Tzedakah, jeder Mal verlicht sind in Erev Shabbos und Erev Yom Tov. And in addition to the good practice that I'm sure you already do of giving tzedakah before lighting Shabbos candles on the eve of Shabbos and Yom Tov. So in addition to that, sollt ihr Tonne sei euch in die Wochentag von Montag und Donnerstag. You should also do that on the weekdays of Mondays and Thursdays zu geben etliche Cent of tzedakah, to give a few cents, a few pennies. In 1959, a few pennies was still worth something. Give a small amount to charity. Und der Iker, wie früher gesagt. But the main thing is, as mentioned earlier, this is the third time the Rebbe is mentioning this. That's not trivial. This is the third time the Rebbe is mentioning this right now. The main thing is, the Rebbe says, the Iker is, in addition to supporting Yiddishkeit and following halacha in your personal life and checking the mezuzahs and the tefillin and giving tzedakah before Shabbos and Yom Tov and on Mondays and on Thursdays, the Iker is, like mentioned earlier, aufhören übertrachten. Stop thinking it over. Übertrachten is more than thinking over. It's cogitating. It's pondering. Stop it. You got to stop going back and thinking about what happened. Und wenn ihr wett annehmen a festen Beschluss in dem, when you will accept upon yourself a firm resolution in this matter, wird Hashem Yisborach eich matzliach sein zum Verwirklichen in Leben. Hashem is going to grant you success in leading a life of accomplishments. This is the advice. This is the path. And it's not just forget it, pretend it didn't happen. No. It's with faith in Hashem, that Hashem is Etzem HaTov. Give it to God. We know nothing. We understand nothing. But we know Hashem is the essence of good. And therefore we can be at peace. Like the Rebbe said, the Rebbe used that word. ruachkeit, tranquility, peace. And it's not just a selfish thing that you should be at peace for yourself. No, this is what's going to help your son. Bivracha zu gute besuras, with blessings for good news. You should let me know good news. B'shem kved kedushas admir shlita maskir, and this letter was signed by the Secretariat. Okay, a powerful letter, an important letter, and Hashem should give the power to whoever needs to implement this letter to be able to implement this letter. And the main thing is that we should have Mashiach already, and there should be an end to all grief and mourning, and all families should be reunited with all of their loved ones. Okay, good night.